Steven Spielberg didn't just make some of the most famous war films ever, he built an entire generation's idea of what war on screen should look like. But here's the twist. The movies he calls essential aren't always what you'd expect. Some are epic blockbusters, others are obscure, low-budget shockers. So which ones made the cut for Spielberg's personal war film, Hall of Fame? Let's dive in, starting with the one he's been quoting for decades. Where Eagles Dare. If you've ever wondered what Spielberg's #1 all-time favorite war movie is, here's your answer. And no, it's not gritty, realistic, or even particularly plausible. It's Where Eagles Dare, a pulpy, over-the-top World War II spy adventure that feels like James Bond crashed into a demolition derby, and Spielberg loves every ridiculous second of it. The premise is pure 1960s action fantasy. Richard Burton plays a steely British intelligence officer leading a hand-picked team deep into Nazi-controlled Bavaria. Clint Eastwood tags along as the token American, silent but deadly, on a mission to rescue a captured Allied general from a fortress literally perched on a mountain. Sounds straightforward? Forget it. Within 20 minutes, you're neck-deep in double crosses, triple crosses, and half the cast secretly working for someone else. Then comes the second half. Non-stop shootouts, explosions, and Eastwood casually stacking up the highest body count of his career. Spielberg isn't drawn to it for realism, quite the opposite. He loves the sheer, unfiltered entertainment value, that unapologetic big adventure feel that's almost impossible to replicate now. Even Richard Burton admitted the idea came from Elizabeth Taylor's kids wanting to see him in something fun. The result? A loud, fast, and utterly implausible war movie that still delivers thrills decades later. And it's not just nostalgia. Where Eagles Dare left fingerprints all over pop culture. The phrase, broadsword calling Danny boy, is still quoted today. Spielberg has dropped it himself, and it's popped up everywhere from Doctor Who to real-life court transcripts. The film also gave Burton his last major U.S. box office hit before his career slid into decline. Why does this top Spielberg's list? Because it's proof that war movies don't all have to be somber, slow, and self-serious to matter. Sometimes the joy is in the spectacle, in the wild stunts and cliffhanger escapes. For Spielberg, Where Eagles Dare isn't just a war movie, it's a reminder of how thrilling, pure, unpolished movie magic can be. The zone of interest. Spielberg has seen just about every major Holocaust film ever made. He directed Schindler's List, after all, so when he calls something the best Holocaust movie since Schindler's List, you pay attention. That honor goes to The Zone of Interest, a quiet, chilling 2023 drama from director Jonathan Glazer. On paper, it's deceptively simple. A German commandant and his wife live in a charming house with a garden, hosting family dinners and playing with their children. The twist? Their home is right next to Auschwitz. Through the walls, we never see the atrocities, but we hear them. The smoke drifts in. The guards pass through. Life for the family is disturbingly normal. Spielberg praised the film for its portrayal of the banality of evil, the idea that horrific acts can coexist with everyday domestic life. It's not about soldiers charging into battle or prisoners plotting escape. It's about how ordinary people can sip coffee while unthinkable things happen just meters away. That, Spielberg argues, can be more haunting than any on-screen violence. The film's impact was immediate. It premiered at Cannes, winning the Grand Prix, and became a global talking point. Critics hailed it as both unsettling and groundbreaking. It went on to gross over $52 million worldwide, an extraordinary figure for such a stark, unconventional film. It scored 5 Oscar nominations, swept the BAFTAs, and sparked heated debates, not just about its subject, but also about Glazer's controversial acceptance speech. What makes it stick isn't spectacle, but restraint. By never showing the horrors directly, Glazer forces the audience to fill in the blanks, and Spielberg knows that can be far more powerful. You feel complicit, uncomfortable, and unable to fully separate the sunny garden from the shadow of the camp. For Spielberg, The Zone of Interest is a reminder that war cinema isn't only about battles and generals. It can be about the human mind's ability to compartmentalize, to ignore the unbearable if it makes life more comfortable. It's not a fun watch, but it's essential, because sometimes the scariest war films aren't about what you see, they're about what you can't unhear. Battleground. Spielberg first saw Battleground as a kid, back when he'd spend afternoons glued to black and white war films on TV. Most faded from memory. This one didn't. Decades later, he still calls it one of the most influential World War II movies he has ever watched. Released in 1949, Battleground was the first major Hollywood combat film to tackle the war seriously after it ended. No propaganda, no patriotic gloss, just the grueling reality of the Battle of the Bulge, told through the eyes of ordinary infantrymen freezing in foxholes. It wasn't just inspired by true events. Screenwriter Robert Pirro had fought in the real battle as a master sergeant with the 35th Infantry Division. He knew what frostbite felt like, what fear sounded like in the dark, and he poured that authenticity into every scene. The production even brought in 20 veterans from the 101st Airborne to train the cast. Those same men appear in the film as extras, lending it an unmistakable air of credibility. Audiences noticed. Battleground became MGM's biggest hit in 5 years and won 2 Oscars. It also kicked off an entire wave of serious war dramas in the 1950s, proving there was an appetite for grounded, character-driven stories about combat. Spielberg admired how the movie balanced tension and humanity. Between firefights, the soldiers swap jokes, gripe about food, and cling to little rituals, things that might seem mundane but keep them sane. There's no sweeping romance or heroic charge, just men trying to survive the cold, the hunger, and the relentless enemy shelling. For young Spielberg, this was a revelation. Here was proof that a war film could be gripping without constant action, that the quiet moments could be as suspenseful as the loud ones. It planted the seed for his own preference for small, human details amid chaos, something you see clearly in Saving Private Ryan. Battleground may not be as famous now, but for Spielberg, it's part of the foundation. Without it, his vision of war on screen might have looked very different. The steel helmet. By 1951, most American war films still played it safe. Then Sam Fuller dropped the steel helmet, a $100,000 Korean War drama shot in just 10 days that ripped through those conventions like machine gun fire. Spielberg cites it as one of the movies that shaped his sense of what war cinema could be. This was the first U.S. film to deal with the Korean conflict, and Fuller didn't sanitize anything. His soldiers are cranky, scared, cynical. One Japanese-American GI recalls his family being thrown into internment camps back home. In another scene, a U.S. soldier executes a prisoner. For early 50s audiences, this was unheard of. Fuller knew what he was doing. Before becoming a director, he'd been a crime reporter and a decorated World War II combat veteran. He'd seen the brutality up close and had no interest in dressing it up. That grit caught Spielberg's attention, and Martin Scorsese's too, with Scorsese later calling Fuller one of the most profoundly moral artists in film. The story follows a ragtag group of soldiers holed up in a Buddhist temple, surrounded by enemy forces. The setting gives the film a claustrophobic feel, heightening the tension. You can almost smell the damp uniforms and hear the creak of the old wooden floors. It wasn't just the story that stuck with Spielberg. There's a character named Short Round, the wisecracking kid sidekick. Sound familiar? Spielberg borrowed the name decades later for Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom as a direct nod to Fuller. When the steel helmet came out, it caused enough controversy to get Fuller investigated by the FBI. But it also made him a filmmaking legend. For Spielberg, it proved you didn't need a massive budget to make an unforgettable war film, just guts, honesty, and the skill to keep audiences glued to the screen. Paths of Glory. Stanley Kubrick's Paths of Glory isn't just a great war film, it's one of the sharpest anti-war statements ever put on screen. Spielberg has long admired it. And when Kubrick died in 1999, Spielberg honored him in a unique way. He screened the film's final scene for a room full of friends. Just that one scene. It's the tavern sequence where a captured German girl sings for a room of exhausted French soldiers. The men fall silent, then tears start to roll. Spielberg said, "We were all crying. The soldiers were crying. We were crying watching the soldiers cry. "That's Kubrick at his most human," Spielberg explained. "Not cold, not clinical, but achingly emotional. And that's the brilliance of Paths of Glory." Released in 1957 and banned in France until 1975 for its portrayal of the French army, the film follows French troops ordered to take an unwinnable German position known as the Anthill. When the attack inevitably fails, the generals call the men cowards and put 3 of them on trial, just to make an example. Kirk Douglas delivers what he later called the best performance of his career, playing the officer defending the scapegoated soldiers. Kubrick's direction is lean, relentless, just 84 minutes with not a second wasted. The courtroom scenes seethe with injustice, while the battlefield sequences are a masterclass in tension and despair. Spielberg sees it as a perfect example of war cinema's ability to strip away the myths and show the machinery of power grinding down ordinary people. For Spielberg, Paths of Glory isn't just a film. It's a reminder that the most devastating war stories don't always hinge on massive battles. Sometimes, the real horror lies in what leaders are willing to sacrifice and who they're willing to blame. Lawrence of Arabia. Ask Spielberg which movie he's watched more than any other, including his own, and the answer isn't Jaws or Saving Private Ryan. It's Lawrence of Arabia. He calls it a miracle. He calls director David Lean his guru. And he's not exaggerating when he says this film almost made him quit before his career even started. Spielberg first saw it as a teenager, in glorious 70mm with full stereo sound. By the time the credits rolled, he walked out of the theater speechless and defeated. The sheer scale, the impossible beauty, the mastery of every frame made him think, the bar is too high. Why even try? But instead of giving up, he went back. And back again. Once a week for a month, he returned to the theater. Somewhere in that 4th viewing, awe turned into determination. He wasn't going to quit. He was going to chase that level of greatness, no matter how long it took. Lawrence of Arabia isn't technically a traditional war movie. It's an epic historical drama about T.E. Lawrence and his role in the Arab Revolt during World War I. But its DNA is steeped in the politics, alliances, and brutal realities of wartime. It's about identity, loyalty, and the cost of trying to unite people with wildly different agendas. The desert cinematography remains jaw-dropping to this day. The performances, especially Peter O'Toole's magnetic, unpredictable Lawrence, still feel fresh. And the script manages to be both sweeping and intimate, full of lines that stay with you for decades. Spielberg's obsession runs deep. He screens it every year for friends, whether they want to watch or not, and has openly said it's one of the most important films ever made for anyone serious about directing. For him, it's a touchstone, a North Star. If Where Eagles Dare is Spielberg's guilty pleasure, Lawrence of Arabia is his personal Bible. Empire of the Sun. Of all the films Spielberg has made, Empire of the Sun might be his most personal war story, and one he also recommends as essential viewing. Based on J.G. Ballard's semi-autobiographical novel, it tells the story of a young British boy, Jim, growing up in Shanghai when World War II erupts. When the Japanese invaded, Jim is separated from his parents and ends up in an internment camp. From there, we watch the war unfold entirely through his eyes, wide, curious, terrified, and strangely enchanted by the machinery of war. Spielberg has said he was drawn to that child's perspective because it mirrors his own sense of wonder and fear growing up watching war movies. Christian Bale, just 13 at the time, delivers a performance so raw and layered that Spielberg still praises it decades later. The film captures the contradictions of war, the horror, the boredom, the surreal beauty of a formation of bombers flying overhead. Shot on location in Shanghai, Empire of the Sun was a massive production, complete with real P-51 Mustang fighter planes and elaborate period sets. But Spielberg keeps the focus on Jim's journey, his loss of innocence, his survival instincts, and his complicated relationship with an American hustler played by John Malkovich. Critics were split when it first came out in 1987, but its reputation has grown steadily. Many now see it as one of Spielberg's most underrated works, a bridge between his more fantastical early films and the grounded realism of Schindler's List and Saving Private Ryan. For Spielberg, Empire of the Sun isn't just about history, it's about how war reshapes a person forever, especially when that person is still a child. Schindler's List. There's a reason Spielberg put off directing Schindler's List for years. He didn't feel ready. When he finally took it on, he made the choice to strip away every trace of Hollywood gloss. Black and white film, handheld cameras, no elaborate lighting setups. He wanted it to feel immediate, unfiltered, almost like a documentary. The story follows Oskar Schindler, a German industrialist who saved over 1,000 Jewish refugees by employing them in his factories during the Holocaust. It's a film that refuses to flinch, showing both the unthinkable cruelty and the small acts of humanity that defined that era. Spielberg has said the minimalistic style was deliberate. He didn't want the audience to feel safe behind the camera. He wanted them in the streets, in the barracks, in the factory with the characters. That rawness is what makes certain images, like the girl in the red coat, burn into your memory. When it was released in 1993, Schindler's List was a critical and commercial phenomenon, winning 7 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director. But its impact went far beyond awards. It became part of Holocaust education programs worldwide and led Spielberg to found the USC Shoah Foundation, dedicated to recording survivor testimonies. For Spielberg, the film is more than just one of his works, it's a responsibility. He's said that making it changed him forever, deepening his understanding of both history and the role of a filmmaker in preserving it. If the zone of interest is about what we don't see, Schindler's List is about making sure we never look away. Saving Private Ryan. Even if Spielberg had never made another movie, Saving Private Ryan would have cemented his place in cinematic history. It's more than just a war film. It's a full sensory assault, one that veterans have described as the most realistic depiction of combat ever put on screen. From the opening frame of the D-Day landing at Omaha Beach, you're thrown into chaos. Spielberg shot it with handheld cameras, desaturated colors, and staccato sound design to mimic the disorientation of battle. There's no triumphant score swelling in the background, just the deafening blast of gunfire, the thud of mortars, and the cries of the wounded. The scene's authenticity came from Spielberg's meticulous preparation. He brought in military advisors, including veterans who had been there on June 6, 1944. Their message was blunt. Please be honest, don't give us Hollywood. So he didn't. The cast went through a brutal boot camp, with some members admitting they hated every second. Tom Hanks later said that discomfort was the point. It bonded them the way combat bonds soldiers. The story itself is deceptively simple. After the Normandy invasion, Captain Miller leads a small squad deep into enemy territory to find Private James Ryan, whose 3 brothers have all been killed in action. It's a mission that raises the central question of the film: how much is one life worth in the context of war? Saving Private Ryan dominated the 1999 Oscars, winning Best Director for Spielberg, and went on to influence nearly every war film that followed. The visceral, immersive style you see in modern battle sequences, from Band of Brothers to 1917, owes a direct debt to it. For Spielberg, this wasn't just another project. It was a chance to honor his father, a World War II veteran, and to create a cinematic record that future generations could feel as well as watch. That's why, even among the many war movies he's praised, this one stands apart. It's both his own personal tribute and a challenge to anyone else who dares to tell stories about war. So, there you have it, 9 war films that shaped Spielberg, inspired him, or came straight from his own hands. From pulp spy thrills to devastating true stories, each one says something different about how we remember war. Which of these have you seen? And which one will you tackle next? Drop your thoughts in the comments, share this list with another film lover, and subscribe, because the next great movie recommendation might just change how you see everything.